we know, I think, as therapists, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that once you actually embrace and accept who you are, that's where the
Mhm.
healing and growth tends to happen,
Mhm.
not from a place of next, 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 right? Like the next mountaintop or the next goal. It's actually reversing the
Mhm.
process that we think is going to make us happy makes us happy when we actually learn that we're worthy, believe that we're worthy, and then go for the goals from there. You don't have to stop having goals, but you have
Mhm.
to kind of learn how to accept and know that you're worthy as is before you actually achieve them, I think.
All right. Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Evergreen RX. I'm your host, Hayden, licensed mental health therapist, Cancer Moon, and the first to get deep at any party. And I am so excited today to welcome our guest, Lauren Larkin. Lauren is a licensed mental health counselor. She's based in New York City, and she has a fantastic expertise in the eating disorder recovery world and in trauma. And she's really built such a thoughtful, supportive online community, and shares such helpful, like practical mental health skills, holistic wellness insights, a lot of humor filled, relatable therapy content too, which I personally love. And I'm just really excited to have her here today to explore more about body image, our relationship to food narratives, how to hopefully nurture a healthy relationship with food and our bodies, especially as we're really in the thick of the holiday season now. It can be such a difficult time for maintaining a healthy relationship.
Totally. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually a Cancer overall, Cancer Sun, Cancer Moon,
Oh, wow.
and then Virgo rising. So there's a lot going on. But relate to you on being the first to get deep at any party. I feel like that was maybe me before becoming a therapist, and now I'm like, nope, don't want any of your story. No, I'm just
Right.
kidding.
That's so true though. That makes sense why you're such a good therapist too. You get the Cancer Virgo mix. That's a good mix. Yeah, so
Feeling things
I'm
at the time. Yep.
yes, I'm so excited. And so just to kind of jump in and get right into it, I wonder kind of what outdated or unhelpful narratives around our body and around food we might all be kind of unconsciously carrying with us.
It's so interesting you asked that because I was thinking about just the experience of being a woman, especially given like the state of the world right now and just like how different it is actually for a woman and like the messages that we receive kind of from a very young age. And it's interesting because I have two eating disorder therapists on my team that are expert level, like came from the higher level of care in
Mm,
that world. And then I have two supervisees who don't really want to specialize in eating disorders. But what I say to them is like, it's going to show up, and it does.
mhm,
So even if we have an intake that does not have anything to do with food and body image, a lot of the times when you're working with women, especially younger women, I feel like there is an implicit kind of desire for control and desire to change that comes up for a lot of women. Like, you are not good enough just as is. You always have to be striving for something better or different, or you always have to be changing or working on yourself in some way. And we love working on ourselves as therapists,
mhm,
obviously. But I think the pressure that comes from the internalized messages from the world, which are you need this product or you need that thing or you need to try this diet or you need to try this lifestyle change, right? Like this, like, holistic wellness kind of thing. I feel like,
mhm,
especially with social media now too, there's always these messages of like, you're just not quite enough as is. You need to be working to be better or different. And if you're better
mhm,
or different, then you'll get everything that you want in the world.
mhm,
And I think that's so outdated because one, we know why those, businesses, which is what they are,
mhm,
exist. Like the diet culture industry or the diet industry is like, multi-billion dollar industry. So
mhm,
that's economically where that's coming from. And they're preying on women more than
mhm,
men, right? To buy these kinds of products and buy into that. Men too, I think, have complicated relationships with their bodies. And I do work with men on eating disorders too, but I do think it's a kind of like more explicitly targeted towards
mhm,
women. So we have this whole industry that's profiting off of low self-esteem. And then we just have like a continual, maybe even in the perfectionistic kind of area
Mhm.
of women and high achieving women, and especially if we're like, think about the 80s and 70s moving forward, it's like
Mhm.
that you can have it all
Mhm.
mentality. So then not only is the woman expected to be beautiful and thin and the housewife of everybody's dreams, but then also a businesswoman that also, right,
Mhm.
if you want to have children, a great mother, like all of these things that I just feel like are exhausting that women
Mhm.
have to deal with.
Mhm.
So those are outdated because what we know, I think, as therapists, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, is that once you actually embrace and accept who you are, that's where the
Mhm.
healing and growth tends to happen,
Mhm.
not from a place of next, 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 right? Like the next mountaintop or the next goal. It's actually reversing the
Mhm.
process that we think is going to make us happy makes us happy when we actually learn that we're worthy, believe that we're worthy, and then go for the goals from there. You don't have to stop having goals, but you have
Mhm.
to kind of learn how to accept and know that you're worthy as is before you actually achieve them, I think.
100%. Yeah, I think you covered a lot of like how complex all of this is and how much of a motivation certain sectors or people or businesses or whatever have to kind of perpetuate this idea that we're not enough, because essentially like our relationship to our body and to dieting or exercising or things like that, it's just kind of another very strong avenue to work out those ideas that we're not enough, and to just continually reach for a moving goalpost. And I think you're so right on the fact that I don't really explicitly work with eating disorders, but all the time people are talking about their relationship to their body and to how they move it and what they put into it, and just in these casual, really insidious ways too, where sometimes it's like not really what we're focusing on, but then you hear it and you're like, oh, but this is so intertwined with this idea that you're not good enough. And that's such a big part of our mental health. And what you were saying of like the acceptance piece, that's something on my own kind of therapy journey, and also journey to become a therapist, is like this piece of, oh my gosh, there's so much I have to unlearn. Like it is like a settling down, a like learning to accept and allow and just release things instead of put more info in and more lessons and like add things on top. A lot of it is like breaking things completely down and being able to heal from there, like you said.
I know I'm working on it at ongoingly, always as as I continue to go. I definitely think that since I was in my eating disorder and to now, I'm a completely different person. And when I think about the big, big differences, I really do think it is the knowing yourself. And that doesn't mean completely loving yourself. That means knowing yourself
Mm,
and allowing yourself to be flawed or allowing
mm,
yourself to not get something done and not hating yourself for that and just saying, kind of like it is what it is. Sometimes I laugh internally to myself of like, am I like too easy on myself? Like, could I use a little bit more of a kick in the butt? But no, I really don't believe that
Mhm,
that's true. I really believe that when we have that compassion for ourselves, and that's been something that I've been learning and reading and thinking about more and more, maybe just
mhm,
even in the last year of my career, is infusing the work with self-compassion. Because
mhm,
truly, the more compassion we have for ourselves, the more compassion we have for others, and it's that kind of broadening and expanding kind of thing versus shutting ourselves down, being
mhm,
short with others, being critical with ourselves, being critical with others, like just leads into that negative spiral that really hits a wall versus like the growth mindset of like allowing two things to be true or six things to be true at the same time and
mm,
really just like kind
mhm.
of having that expansive thinking.
Yeah, I like that you brought up our relationship to others too, because I think that's something, you know, motivating me to kind of talk to you during this time of the year with the holidays, with, the we can all feel there's this specific pressure and challenge around the holidays, and kind of dealing with more of an increase in like body negative conversations. I feel like, talking about needing to kind of like earn what we're eating or burn it off after, or, like, people commenting when you're going back and visiting family, and so they comment on your body or comment on how it's changed in um whatever type of way. And I just wonder, how do we like navigate all of those extra challenges and navigate, either talking or not talking about kind of essentially what becomes the elephant in the room,
Right.
it seems like during this time of year.
It's so interesting because I think my answer changes for each person that I will speak to,
Mhm.
and it also, I think, depends on where you're at in your journey with your if you have a full-blown eating disorder or if you have disordered eating or if you're just kinda, more sensitive to weight loss or weight gain at this time in your life, and that's a breathing and growing and evolving thing, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of amorphous, like, I don't believe that recovered is language that I like to use just because I think that if then you struggle after you say that you're recovered, you might experience a lot of shame. So, sort of like
Mhm.
in the recovery bucket or just in kind of the ongoing working on myself bucket is can we have conversations maybe in private with the people who are going to hear it and are
Mhm.
willing to change their behavior? Before we get to these tables, like, say you have a really great relationship with your mom or your dad or your cousin or whoever, like, if you have an ally and you have an advocate, even in private or even, like, prior to going into some of these things that understands you and hears and sees you, that will make some of these other encounters, I think, a lot softer because
Mm.
you won't feel like it's me and my stuff against everybody else and this is hopeless and nobody understands me and nobody gets this. So I think having conversations with people who are willing and capable of change
Mm.
in the one-on-one setting can be really helpful leading up to some of these things like, mom, I really, really need you to not comment on my body no matter if you think that
Mhm.
I'm too heavy or too thin or too tall or I dressing ugly or whatever, if we can just keep it to no comments at all over Thanksgiving, I would very much appreciate it
Mhm.
because some people are going to be willing and able to help you and support you in this. And then there's the people who just aren't. So I
Mhm.
always kind of want to do an inventory with a client on who is a safe person and someone who is willing and capable of change. Okay, then we want to have those conversations and be as clear and explicit about what we need from them. And if they're willing to meet us there or even meet us closer to the middle, great. A lot of people are not willing and or capable of change. So we have to keep that in mind, whether it's their own mental health stuff, whether they're just so deeply rooted in their beliefs about this kind of thing, whether they don't
Mhm.
believe that it's harmful at all, whatever that is, I always kind of encourage clients to choose their advocacy.
Mm.
Choose how draining or not draining it would be for you to go into this guns blazing and try and change everybody's mind about diet
Mm.
culture.
Mhm.
Does that sound conducive to your mental health, or would it be easier to just kind of put up an internal armor
Mhm.
when walking into these situations and saying, like, "It's not my responsibility to change Aunt Susan's opinion about weight loss and weight gain."
Mhm.
She's gonna make a comment. She will always make a comment, and what can I do to just try and let it bounce off of me versus engaging in a conversation that's going to go nowhere. You
Mhm.
might feel like it's really important for you to change everybody's mind at certain points in your recovery journey, and that's also fine too. If you wanna be the loud and proud advocate for anti-diet culture in these family settings, I will never tell you that that's a bad thing,
Mhm.
unless it is something that is draining you and your
Yeah.
resources and your ability to self-soothe and take care of yourself. Sometimes it may seem passive or it may seem like antithetical to like what you believe in and your values, but if you have to protect yourself by just saying, "Sure, yep, you go walk and you burn that you burn that pie off." Like not encouraging it and not engaging in it, but just in your
Mhm.
mind like that's their journey and I'm not going to be able to change their journey today. It's better for me to just sit here and not go on the walk and not engage in this conversation. Separate yourself, go to the bathroom when everyone's talking about it or
Mhm.
go text a friend and go on your own walk outside that has nothing to do with burning off calories, but maybe has to do with just your own mental health. Like, find that person that you talk to about this prior to entering into the family gathering. Go talk to
Yeah.
them in the corner about a show that you watched or change the subject if you can. It doesn't always have to be this like very difficult, very contentious. Let me change your mind about all the things that I'm learning in therapy. If you don't want to learn them, that's sometimes not your problem to kinda take
Yeah.
them on, if that makes sense. Or that's something that
Totally.
helps me at least too.
I love it because it's like it's so realistic in a way. Sometimes I think as therapists we can really get into some like kind of la land of like what we wish was possible and what the like healthiest outcome could be or the most beneficial. And it's like, man, like yeah, you're not going to change everybody's mind. And really, if that's taking up too much of your own energy and your reserves, like leave it. Who cares? It's you're having your own experience and the other person is going to have their own experience, and we get such little if any control over what other people experience. And so I just really like that kind of it's a very like permission giving mindset of whatever works for you and however that looks. If that means literally getting up and going to the bathroom and just kind of like excluding yourself, it's like that is kind of the best option because it's whatever feels most accessible to you. And I just really like the way that you talk about it because I think especially I don't know if especially in terms of like diet culture or like conversations like this, people feel the pressure to like change it. But I would say that the pressure is at least there, if not more so than other things. And it comes from a good place too. Like, if someone's commenting on your body and they repeatedly do it or they comment on their own in a negative way, and that that's just, all this old cultural bullshit and like conditioning, it's a well-intentioned thing to want to change that, but not always the most, conducive to that moment maybe, or like what you're saying, like where we each are personally at in our own, relationship to our body or things like that. And I wonder too, like I've always kind of been curious over, especially in like really close personal relationships, um, how do we navigate like talking or not talking about how another person looks? Because like I could think of like with a friendship or something, if someone's been going to this like hot yoga class a lot more frequently and you know their arms are looking really toned, or you notice some change in their body, it's kind of like, or they look really good in an outfit. It's like this line of like, do I say something about this or not? Because at least personally, I don't want to like ever make people feel like their identity is tied up in the way that they look, because I know how harmful that can be. Um, but then also sometimes you want to like mention or compliment someone or notice something. And I don't know how that's navigated either.
It's so hard because a lot of people don't mean any harm, right? They don't mean any harm when they're commenting on your body. They are trying to build you up. They are trying to make you feel good. They are, right, trying to maybe acknowledge all the work that they know you're going to Soul Cycle 4 times a week. Like, "You look great. You look amazing." And then sometimes that is helpful and sometimes that is harmful. And I don't know if there's a perfect formula for when it
Mm-hmm.
tips over into the harmful category. I think if you have an inkling that someone is struggling with an eating disorder,
Mm,
if you know that they've struggled in the past, if you know that they've received treatment for something like this, or if you're noticing that their relationship to food is changing, or they're not participating in a lot of the activities that they used to, and you're not seeing them a lot, and their behavior seems like really extreme. I mean, I would say try not to comment on their body like weight loss wise or, body changes in general, like maybe
mm-hmm.
just leaving it as like broad, "You look amazing today." Like, "You look I love that outfit. You look gorgeous. Love what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing.
Mm-hmm.
Love everything that you're doing. Like, you look
Mm-hmm.
incredible." But if you know that they might be struggling, I would say stray away from that altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the internalized pressure that comments like that create for someone who is deep, deep in an eating disorder are, "Oh my god, I have to keep going." Because not just because 'cause they're doing it all for vanity or for compliments,
Mm,
but it's almost like it adds 10 times more to the internal dialogue of, "I gotta get up, and I gotta do this, and I gotta do that, and I have to eat this many grams of protein, and I have to make sure I get to the 5 a.m. workout class." If someone's like, "Oh my
mhm,
god, your arms look so toned," that goes into the bucket, whether they realize it or not, of the
mm,
pressure that they put on themselves, right? So And it's the same thing with those negative comments that come more so from family, I think,
Mhm.
than friends. Friends aren't gonna be like, "You look fat today." If
Mhm.
they are, I mean, there's nothing wrong with fat, and fat positive needs to be more of a colloquial, term that we use and not in a
Mhm.
negative way. But if they're making negative comments about your body and implying that you look bad, that's not a good friend, right? So I think it's being easy on yourself if something slips out of your mouth and you didn't mean it that way, and if you just kinda try to reframe and correct your language around what you're
Mhm.
trying to say to somebody, you're just trying to make them feel good. Is there
Mhm.
another way I can try to make them feel good in this moment?
Right.
Would be a great question. And then if you have someone in your life who you know is struggling, I would really, really encourage to not make any comments about their body at
Mm.
all, and
Mhm.
maybe even, like, seek some therapy or some counsel from someone who does know a little bit more about eating disorders than you do on how to express concern for someone in a loving and not confrontational way, if that makes sense.
Mhm. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful, and I think the thing that you said is, like, you can always just kinda go broad strokes, like, that's never a bad thing, like, even just someone looking really, really radiant or really it's like that's doesn't actually even have to do anything with their it's the whole picture altogether, it's not any part of them that makes them look beautiful in that way, and yeah, I like that a lot, and I think kind of thinking about generally, like even people that don't struggle with an eating disorder but are just existing in the world we exist in today and steeped in the way that we talk about these things all the time. I wonder like um how to navigate the line between like moving our bodies, wanting to exercise, kind of like what you're talking about, like the going on a walk after, a Thanksgiving meal or whatever. Like, but just in general, like wanting to move our bodies and exercise or, just take care of ourselves in that way. And then the line between that and feeling like we should move because we to deserve food or to make up for food that we have eaten or, that kind of mentality that starts to creep in.
I was talking to one of my amazing clinicians about this. We had a delay in our airport when we were on a trip together, and we started getting our steps in and we walked around. And it was interesting because it was like, look at us, two eating disorder therapists getting our steps in.
Mhm.
Some might, fire the alarms and say, like,
Mhm.
oh, disordered, disordered, disordered. But no, because all of these behaviors start out, I think, in a way usually of I want to take better care of myself.
Mhm.
Unless you are just hell bent on weight loss for weight loss's sake, I think a lot of people want to exercise and want to eat well because they care about themselves. It's when it
Mhm.
turns into a punishment that's the problem. And
Mhm.
it's what's your intention behind it? For us, it was we're going to be sitting on our butts the rest of the day on a plane for like 5 hours. We should probably move our bodies because we know that it's good for us. Let's pace up and down while we chat and have a good time with each other.
Mhm.
That is a non-disordered way of getting your steps in a
Mhm.
day. Thinking about the intention behind your action. And I think that a red flag or orange flag, I would actually, it's red. A red flag, I would say, is if you have any rigid thinking around numbers. Are you hell bent
Mhm.
on getting to your workout class 6 times a week or 4 times a week? Or even like, are there these numeric like ways that you are holding yourself accountable
Mhm.
versus the intention of like, how do I feel today? How do I want to feel? Why do I go to these things? Oh, because they make me feel good, right? Like this morning, I woke up, I knew I wanted to get up and have a productive day. And I know I need to have something
Mhm.
usually on the calendar to make me do that, right? I got up, I worked out, I knew it would make me feel good. I knew it would get my day started. I knew it was going to be my time to not have my
Mhm.
phone and sit there and be mindful. And I didn't work too hard. I really like just kind of did what I needed to do to get through it. I put my weights down a lot. And that's how I can test out in my brain of like,
Mhm.
would I have been okay canceling it if I woke up and I really didn't feel like it? Yup. Knowing how to, like, push and knowing how to rest, I think is so important because I pushed
Mhm.
myself in the areas of, "No, I really wanna take good care of myself. I really wanna get up. I don't wanna roll out of bed and get on my first call. I wanna, like, take good care of myself today," and
Mhm.
sometimes exercise and food is a huge part of that.
Mhm.
So, same thing with eating a vegetable. Are you eating a vegetable because you only eat vegetables now and that's the only food that you're allowing yourself and it's a punishment and all you're going
Mm.
to do is eat broccoli for the rest of the week and chicken that has no seasoning on it or breadcrumbs and right, like, are you punishing yourself through food because you think that you need to deprive yourself in order
Mhm.
to eventually feel good? Well, if every day you're punishing yourself, when is the reward gonna actually happen? But if
Mhm.
you're rewarding yourself every day and saying, "I deserve a nourishing, wonderful meal because I am worthy of food and my body needs food no matter how much I've exercised," you might get the reward all the time. It's the process oriented thoughts versus the outcome oriented thoughts. I'm not working
Yeah.
out so that I look a certain way at a certain point in time. I'm working out because it feels good during and it feels good
Mm.
after, and it's going to feel good the next time I do it.
Mhm.
Right? It's kind of the same thing with taking care of yourself with food, making the experiences a lot more mindful and checking in with yourself, and you have to be really real with yourself with your
Mhm.
eating disorder because eating disorder thoughts are insidious. They are sneaky. The eating disorder can be creeping back in, and that's why I think working with a therapist in an ongoing capacity can be really helpful to just be real with you and say, let's sit with these thoughts for a second. What are the intentions behind what you're trying to do?
Mm.
Like I've had clients try to do different challenges here and there, like a whole 30 or
Mhm.
what's the hard one? 75
75
hard,
hard.
which I'll be the first one to say that one, no matter what, is too intense. That one, no matter what, is disordered in and of itself.
Yeah.
And I'll say, what are the exceptions to this? Why are we doing this? What is the idea that we're going to end up at the end of the 75 days?
Mhm.
What do you think that you're going to get from this? And why,
Mm.
what are our intentions behind it? And I'll really hone in on that with clients because if they can't give me a good enough answer that has to do with holistic wellness and taking good care of themselves, I'm not going to buy it. And I'm going to say, let's adjust.
Yeah,
I'm not going to take away your goals of wanting to take good care of yourself, but let's adjust this so that it's
'cause, like,
intentional.
it sounds
Yeah.
like what you're saying is, like, can you enjoy each of the 75 days instead of do the 75 days to then hopefully be happy at the end of it?
Right.
Yeah, and that is you I mean, you gotta be a real, like, really vigilant, I feel like, in your own head, and it sounds like too, if you're thinking about your intention with doing something, getting up and doing a workout, like, um, the idea would kind of be like, if you can't really come up with any intention behind it besides like, I just think I should do this, like, I need to move, I have to move today, then that's where you're kind of like,
Right.
alarm bell would be going off. And I don't know, like, what would you say, like, in response to that? Would then your advice be to not do it if you can't come up with another reason? Or, like, how do you deal with that?
I think it's like, okay, why? Why should you? Why do you have to? What is that? And then we could get down to the nitty-gritty of like what are those narratives, beliefs, experiences that you've gone through in your life that lead you to believe that you have to do it.
Mhm.
And I think if we can identify those, we can shift the behavior. I am realistic as a provider that I will not be able to take all of your coping mechanisms away from you. And then you're just going to be perfect and happy
Mhm.
with me for doing that. And I don't think that that's a realistic thing for anybody to ask themselves. If you've been living this way, if you deeply, deeply believe that you have to move in order to earn food, I'm going to say, let's just do some experimenting here. Like, let's just see if we can decrease. I'm a harm reduction therapist through and through, and I would so much
Mhm.
rather not go to extremes that are going to have someone say, F that therapist, she's the worst, and she's asking me to do something that's out of my comfort zone, and I'm never seeing her again. I would rather keep going with a supportive, like,
Mhm.
very intentional, again, step down from some of these behaviors,
Mhm.
right? So, and it depends on like level of pain that this is causing a person. Like, say they're training for a marathon and they cannot come up with why they want to do it at a certain point, but they've done 5 marathons and they're like, "Oh, well, I have to sign up for the next one," and they're miserable and their feet are hurting and they like, don't want to do it. I might be like, maybe we don't do this. But if they're like, no, I enjoy it, I love it so much, but this training schedule has been so tough and I don't know if I can do it. I'd be like,
Mhm.
what would happen if you just didn't do the 5 mile tomorrow? Do you think you could
Mhm.
still run the 10 on Sunday? Like, I think you might still be able to do that, and just seeing if we can add more rest in
Mhm.
to what they've got going on already. "Hey, what would
Mhm.
happen if you didn't work out and you still had the ice cream? You think anything's
Mm.
gonna happen crazy? Okay, let's try it, see how it feels." Increasing that window of tolerance to the
Mm.
distress of breaking a cycle of thinking. But it's
Yeah.
gonna take a lot of time, like, I'm always, like, sitting here thinking about my own experience, and I'm like, it took me so long to unlearn and to really not think about some of the things that I used to think about all day, every day, automatically, like, taking up all this brain space. So I would never expect someone else to just drop what they're doing and
Mm.
trust me blindly into into the recovery world, because it gets harder sometimes before it gets better.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I absolutely love what you said about increasing your window of tolerance for breaking the like negative cycles that sometimes we can find ourselves being in for so long or almost as long as, memory goes. And yeah, that is definitely a window of tolerance issue. And yeah, as we both know, like if you just strip someone of their coping mechanisms immediately, like it's not going to go well. You're not really going to help. It might be even more harmful because then you've really exceeded that window of tolerance, and then it kind of reinforces some of those negative cycles. And yeah, I just think so much of this stuff is so like insidious and sneaky, and like even just bringing awareness around it. And I see why. And I know from following you that like you have talked a lot about self-compassion, um and that's something in my own life and practice too. I've really come back and revisited, and I'm like, man, this shit is everything. I'm like, this is actually so foundational. And I think really so much of it is because there can be this like fear on trusting ourselves, like, oh, but I've punished myself for so long, or the system I work off of is just like striving and setting these high goals and then pushing and pushing and pushing myself to get there. And like a lot of times people look around and they're like, and that's why I'm where I am today. People can be like, well, this is the example, or I look this certain way because I push myself. So what are you saying? Like now if I just listen to myself and go easier, that what's going to happen. And I think that's a big thing that I'm very curious to hear what you think about, of like when we start to change these narratives in this relationship, um that there's a potential that will start to also look different or feel different. And how do you kind of continue forward, when maybe some of those thoughts come back really strongly because of the changes that you're noticing in your own body?
That's, I think, why eating disorders come back, and they
Mhm.
go away and then they come back. Actually, there's so many experiences of people going to treatment, formal treatment, like several times in their life. And I think that's because feeling better does often require us to accept changes in our bodies and the way that we look. And that's why I don't walk around saying self-love is the goal. You have to love yourself fully all the
Mm.
time in order to be healed. Because I just don't know if that's completely realistic. Some people still really wish that they could have a not recovered body or an eating disordered body. And they may have had that in the past, and they may always think in their mind that they look better at that point, and they wish that they could be at that point at all times. And they could feel a lot better when they're not
Mm.
in that space.
Mhm.
And that's what I
Mhm.
always have to remind my longer term clients is like, sure, you have fit into a different pair of jeans at a different time, and you have your jeans put away that you can't even look at right now because you feel like you're in a heavier body right now, or you feel like you don't like the way that your body looks right now.
Mm.
Do we remember what you felt like and what our sessions looked like at that
Mm.
point where the jeans fit you? Let's go back to that because I've been with you through this time. So, as the therapist who does ongoing work with someone who is in this space, I can put up the mirror and say, "Hey, I was with you during this time." And even if I can't, because it's a newer client, I can take my own experience and I can say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm guessing it felt like this at this time." And you're forgetting and you're idealizing the body to mean happiness when
Mm.
it seems like you're pretty happy now, or you're happier now in the day to day. And it's just sometimes when you're staring at the mirror or feeling like really down on yourself that you start to think, well, if I did that, maybe I'll be happier out of this moment. And
Mm.
that's what I have to kind of convince my clients of as we
Yeah.
keep going is like, how are you feeling in the space? How are you doing? What's coming up for body image? And a lot of my clients do like the retraining of the brain by just saying, nope, we don't do that anymore. We don't think about that anymore. We just eat
Right.
the regular butter. We eat the avocado. We eat the peanut butter, whatever. We
Right.
are going to just, nope, we don't think that way anymore. And we keep going. And that is actually helpful, the avoidance in that instance. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't like recommend avoidance at all times, but the avoidance of those thoughts that lead us down the eating disorder behaviors can actually be really helpful because then we get to a point where our bodies are a little bit more recovered. And then we're able to say, yeah, I'm not super happy with how I look right now, but
Mm.
I feel a lot better. So it's the
Mhm.
trade-off and the ability to work toward accepting and loving whatever body we're in that I do think takes a lot of time. And there might be some people that I work with or have, encountered in my life that might say, "Yeah, I'm probably still gonna always wish I looked like that one
Mhm.
photo from 2017, but would I trade it for what I have now, what I'm able to have, which is, maybe a thriving career or great
Mhm.
relationships or, able to go out and about and explore the city and go to nice restaurants and go to fun things because I'm not so consumed by my eating
Mm.
disorder?" It's what are you trading off in terms of life stuff for the perfect body? I think at
Mhm.
the end of the day, a lot of people would rather choose being loved and loving in return and having experiences in the world that they really enjoy than just like having rock hard abs.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're so like pragmatic in certain ways with it, which is like what is needed, and it really is so inspiring too, because I completely agree with you. And it's funny because avoidance, typically we're like, well, let's stop avoiding, like what's going on. But in this situation, and I think it's like it kind of translates to other things, like I know with anxiety too, like especially in my own life, you have to get to a point where you're kind of like, no, no, we don't do that. Nope, I'm not going to think about that. No, I'm like not going to go down the same path over and over again and just like choose to redirect, which is mindfulness. I mean, really being aware and then choosing another path and knowing that if we do that enough, it becomes more automatic. And
Mhm,
also, exactly what you're saying of what is the trade off? Maybe some of these thoughts might pop up from time to time, and that'll always happen because no matter what healing we do, we're still living in a world that is very
yeah,
not conducive to self-compassion or acceptance or feeling good in the body that you have, no matter how it looks most of the time. And so we're still going to be steeped in that, so it's like probably not even too much of a indicator of how like how much better you feel or how healed you feel in certain ways, because it's almost like we're getting new input all the time that's going to continually pop up or maybe kind of poke on those little old thoughts, and having that kind of relationship and understanding within ourselves of like, no, actually these are things that I'm not going to entertain anymore. I'm not really going to go down that path.
and sometimes you have to be at the point where the recovery is working, and that's why the higher level of cares, although they are very, problematic and the insurance stuff and like there's so much that needs to be changed about our system that we have for this kind of support. But that's why when we get to like a weight stabilization place or just a food stabilization place where someone is nourishing their body enough to be able to have their brain work this way, I'm always kind of like, you have to trust. You have to trust me. You have to trust the
Mm,
process. You
mm,
have to work with your dietitian. You have to do what they're asking you because
mm,
we won't get to the lack of anxiety or lack of depression or like ability to do a lot of what you and I are talking about, which is like the mindfulness or the redirection or the
mhm,
reframing or the deeper kind of therapeutic work if we're not in a
mhm,
place where our body's ready for that. So sometimes you have to just trust that it is going to get better if we do what our care team is telling us to do.
mhm.
But that is, you know, relational therapy in a way, because if you
Right.
don't have that relationship with your client, it's going to be really hard to get them to buy into something that's a complete different formula than the formula that they've been using.
Right. Yeah. So I'm curious, kind of like one of my last things that I wanted to ask you about is um I think that there can be such a level, and I think this goes for almost anybody or most of the people that I talk to, even without having struggled with a diagnosable eating disorder, but having some more of those disordered eating thoughts or experiences, is there can be this kind of like constant dissociation from our body. And obviously, this can be intertwined with trauma a lot of times too, and just living in the time that we live in. And um, I just wonder if you have any advice on kind of working with that discomfort that we might feel as soon as we really are present in our body at a higher level, sitting there, and whether this is like a meditation or going to a workout class or doing something that is for your betterment, but it also makes you acutely aware of how it feels to be in your body. And that can be such a uncomfortable sensation sometimes. So I wonder how we can kind of work with that or maybe expand that ability, a little bit at a time.
Right. So that's kind of like the embracing the dissociative part in, like, parts work where you
Mhm.
see it as something that protects you. I think even just shifting that, like, "No, I'm dissociating, and I'm not supposed to, and this is bad, and oh, no," that'll get you
Mm,
more dissociated, right?
mm,
Because the thoughts that are distressing about the dissociation
mm,
is going to, like, continue to get our bodies to, like, double down into whatever it's trying to do to protect us. But if
mm,
we see it as a trauma response, a protective mechanism, if we see it as what we maybe have never seen it as before, and we embrace that it is something that is in our bodies and that has been learned by our body to kind of protect us from things that it thinks we cannot tolerate,
mhm.
then we can say, again, self compassion. Oh, I dissociated and I ate that whole bag of chips. Okay, moving on. And truly,
Mhm,
like, I think that for me, with the binge part of the eating disorder stuff that I've struggled with over the past however many years, moving on and just saying, "We're gonna forget that happened, and we're gonna just
Yeah.
go on to the next meal and the next thing, and we're gonna just not think about it any more than it needs to be thought about. That happened, that served an emotional purpose for me,
Mm,
that did something protective for me, and I'm gonna just keep moving forward," is
mhm,
really helpful. And then changing your state can be one of the best things that I've found to kind of talk through with clients in terms of getting out of dissociation. I will also talk through dissociation as it is happening with my clients in the moment. I will ask if they have a dissociative tendency or tendency to detach. Where did you go? When did you leave? Where are you now? Like, are you half with
mhm,
me? Are you, how have you been able to stay? And
mm,
clients will be able to identify for me sort of in the moment, in session, what works for them or what doesn't work for them, or what
mm,
triggers them and what doesn't trigger them, kind of if we are able to go there while we're
mm,
talking about whatever we're talking about.
mhm,
And then I think that really helps us be able to identify triggering environments or thoughts or feelings outside of the space, and then see if we can hang on. And again, like you said, it's that little step. So, can I try to go splash cold water on my face? Can I
mm,
try to listen to something? Can I get into any of my five senses? Should I just try to go on a really quick walk around the block, even if just 5 seconds,
mm,
around my apartment? If I have nowhere to go, nothing else to do, that's just a quick loop to see if the cold air or hot air or whatever
mhm,
temperature it is kind of can bring us back. And I think that's one of the DBT like skills that I've kind of
mm,
just like plucked from here and there that I've learned from my very eclectic kind of toolbox. But this idea of like, can we engage in one of our other senses and see if that helps us hang on and stay in the moment? And
yeah,
then sometimes the dissociation is going to serve a purpose. And if we can reflect on it afterwards and see, what did that do for us? What did it take us out of? What are those memories we're trying to avoid? And then in a trauma informed way, maybe try to go there, try to open up that box a little bit and then close it in a
mhm,
safe way, knowing that our clients have a lot of tools and plans for after session that can be a way that I recommend working on it. But I think it is very, very hard to work on a dissociative state by yourself. So having a really good therapist to help
Mm.
guide you through it, I think, and even just talk you through the fact that it's not shameful, it's okay to experience this. Like, there's nothing wrong with you, you're not weird. This is a normal symptom of trauma and, you know, mostly trauma, right? So, or just life experiences that have caused your
Mm.
body to try and protect you. It's going to help you kind of get through it.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's expanding that window of tolerance and understanding that, whether it's dissociation or something else that you're coping with, that that's going to kind of stay online and be necessary until it feels like it's not so necessary. And maybe it's okay to be back in your body and really feeling um what that feels like for a minute, and then maybe in the future for 5, and then maybe, like that. It really can be such a process of understanding too, like, again, not bringing in that shame, and being compassionate, like, okay, if this is what I'm doing right now, this is, or after the fact, it's probably what I needed, what my body was saying I needed, and it was the number one tool that my body felt like was within grasp, you
Exactly.
know.
And that's
Yeah.
not a bad thing.
Yeah. This has been so wonderful talking to you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a wonderful conversation. I hope it helps people kind of get through the holidays with different expectations of themselves and others, like not putting so much
Mm.
pressure on themselves. Because I feel like that was the big theme of today, and just kind of having compassion for whatever stage you're in.
Yeah, I feel like people could like listen to this multiple times if they wanted to, because honestly, just hearing you talk, you have such a like compassionate, accepting, really like loving energy around everything that you talk about. And sometimes that's what we need too, is just to like anchor into something of like, oh, it's actually okay, and like, this is a process, and just I think that you do such a good job um, with giving that energy to people with the way that you speak. And so, where can people find you if they want to keep up with you?
Okay, thank you so much for all those kind words. You were so sweet. I am LEL Therapy on TikTok and Instagram, and it's leltherapy.com for our practice.
Okay, awesome. Well,
Thank
thank you
you so
so much. It
much.
was wonderful to talk to you.
You are wonderful. Thank you for having me.
All right, bye guys. I'll catch you in the next one.